Good afternoon. If you are here in India, I see some faces that look very familiar. Good morning. If you are in Americas, probably still asleep. And then Europe, I think it's just lunchtime. So welcome to the eighth day of the Days of Miracles. We are moving along very quickly. We are already halfway through, isn't it? More than halfway, right? It's 15 days and had already so many amazing teachers. So today we are so fortunate to welcome Venerable Robina Courtin again. Yeah, we had our last Friday opening the program like every year in the last 5 years. And we will have her today. And then on the last day of miracles, the big day, the full moon day, Shutra Duchen, we're going to have her again closing the program. Yes, and we just heard today that His Holiness the Dalai Lama will teach at the temple, at his temple, on that big day, the last day, as every year, and telling us Jataka tales, and I'm sure it will be online. So then please pencil that in already if it fits into your time zone. Yeah, it will be that Friday, next week Friday, 8 o'clock Indian time. Usually it starts 8:30. So many of you might be still asleep, maybe. Maybe you can see the recordings. So we are just waiting for Venerable Robina to arrive. So please, everybody, have good questions. Yeah, Venerable Robina loves questions. So if you have anything, this is the chance to ask. Thank you so much for joining again. And since, Raisa, you warn me when Venerable Robina comes. Yeah. Since we have a little, oh, she's here. I don't see her yet. Oh, there she is. Good morning, Venerable Robina. Oh, Venerable Robina, you're muted.
I'm here now.
Good morning,
Good.
Robina. Thank you so much for joining us
Oh,
again
lovely.
for the eighth day of the Days of Miracles. It's
Good.
good to have you this time three times, beginning, middle,
Good.
and end. Wonderful.
Good.
Thank
Good.
you.
Good. I love it. So, what's our topic today?
Being steady in a no matter what.
Oh, my gosh.
So
See,
you
listen,
can
that's,
take it anywhere.
yeah, I mean, that's the proof of success of being a Buddhist, isn't it? Staying steady no matter what. Wow. So, let's look at it. Get right to the crux of Buddha's advice about exactly how to do that. Well, let's get to it. Okay. Perfect. So, we just maybe we'll just do the little refuge prayer, do a mandala, offer a mandala, requesting the Buddha for at least to bless my speech so I can say something useful, and request the teachings, and then we'll do a little refuge prayer as well. So just do a little mandala, thinking everybody we offer all the marvelous things of the world to the Buddha as a request for the teachings. Do like that. Venerable can lead it.
Sashi perkijik chomitok tram rirapling zini de gyempadi sange zindu mikte owayi trokun namdak chukla chupa shokidam guru ratna mandala kam nyayatayami.
And imagine Buddha happily accepts our offering. Okay, how to stay steady. I mean, this is the thing. This is truly getting to the crux, the absolute central point of all of Buddha's advice, really, So even though we know if we're good little Buddhists and we've done a bit of study, we'll know that the main cause of samsara, the main cause of suffering, is this primordial marigpa, primordial grasping at an intrinsic self and intrinsic everything else, believing totally that things exist out there from their own side. That's the main cause of samsara. But effectively, we learn this in the middle scope of the Lam Rim. Effectively, Lord Buddha tells us in the Four Noble Truths that the main reason for our suffering is actually attachment. So in day-to-day life, and if we understand Buddha's view of the universe even a little bit, we're going to realize that even just being in this human body of the five senses, living in a world made up of, constructed of the five senses, then of course attachment's the main source. The attachment's the long-term cause of how come we've got these bodies, and I mean, basically we live in a world of the five sense objects, don't we? And we have these five senses, and what drives all of that is this emotional hunger, this attachment, which is the main voice of that ego grasping, this primordial dissatisfaction, this primordial ego hunger, emotional hunger that's never happy, and which completely believes that when I get the objects of the five senses, I mean, that's the first level, that they will somehow, contact with them will bring happiness, will bring satisfaction. This is driving every living being. Even when you're highly advanced, it's still there, you know, until you realize emptiness. It's going to be there driving us. It's so utterly primordial. I mean, you know, we can think of attachment as kind of simple. Oh, I like chocolate cake. Oh, I can't resist music. I mean, that's the grossest level, you know. It's primordial, and it's deeply ingrained in our being, and it's the cause of even how come we have a body of the five senses in the first place. So understanding the character of attachment is the key to success in understanding, therefore, how to get rid of it. You know, if you've got a problem, you'll never solve it until you know what the name of the problem and you identify the actual problem. So the problem is attachment. So if we know how it functions, then we'll know how to solve the problem, isn't it? So let's look at attachment. I mean, it's this never-ending topic, and we can never get bored with it, I'm quite sure. But I remember Lama Yeshe saying that, you know, I can tell you about attachment for one whole year. We'll never begin to understand it until we start building up something deeply inside. I mean, we can hear the words, and we have to start with the words. But, you know, that's just the beginning. So, but the crucial thing is, you know, is to understand clearly what Buddha means by it, not what we think it means. I mean, this word in our culture, we've got another meaning for it altogether. In fact, it's equivalent to something good. You say, oh, she's attached to her family, you know, and that's a good thing, but not the way Buddha is describing. The attachment is this name of a really serious mental illness. And that drives everybody, and it's hard to hear it this way it's impossible practically to identify the root delusion, but attachment itself is hard enough to identify. We can sort of see the symptoms of it every day, all this dissatisfaction, and especially when it comes to things like food. Everybody's attached to food, you know, thinking about it all the time, craving it, can't say no to it, then you wish you didn't have it, and you get fat, and a big drama all around attachment to food, for example. But that indicates the grosser, you know, problem of attachment. But it's just so primordial. So why is it helpful to understand attachment in order to help us know how to stay steady no matter what? Well, it's totally central, because the energy of attachment, it's multifaceted, as I like to say. And the first level of it, the most primordial, is and we're born with this, you know, is this feeling of dissatisfaction. Your mother doesn't teach you. It's absolutely primordially automatic. And what is dissatisfaction? Well, I mean, it's in the long term, and we're going to go into this, in the long term, dissatisfaction is the consequence of following attachment. Because you see, roughly speaking, attachment is this exaggerated, distorted viewpoint. I'm going to go more deep into it, that causes the object to look very delicious. Attachment exaggerates the deliciousness of the cake. It exaggerates the deliciousness of the new job, the new handbag, the body, the other person, the music, whatever it might be. One of the key functions of all the neurotic states of mind in Buddhist psychology is that they exaggerate, they embellish, as Lama Zopa says, they decorate. So when we get this, it really helps us understand. So attachment exaggerates the deliciousness of something. It's a bit like, you know, you see a 50, let's say a 500 euro banknote, 500 euro note, but what appears to you is 500,000, or even 5,000. So you have a 500 note, but for so long have you believed in that 5,000 that even that 500 appears to you as 5,000. Because you see, in other words, attachment is exaggerating the actual characteristic of that 500 rupee note. And you even believe, you see it as 5,000, you believe it as 5,000. So naturally you get all excited and you go spend it expecting 5,000's worth. And what will happen when the reality hits you that it's only worth 500? Guess what? You'll be disappointed. So really this dissatisfaction is a build-up from countless lifetimes, Buddha says, of following attachment, believing in an attachment story that the cake will make you happy, the boyfriend will make you happy, this will make you happy, that will make you happy. It's exaggerated. So always what you end up meeting is disappointment. And this is 1,000 times a day. So dissatisfaction is the natural consequence of long-term, life after life, following attachment, believing in attachment, and then hitting the brick wall and you get dissatisfaction, you get disappointed. That's the energy of attachment. So we get born with that. So then, of course, we continue to follow it. So attachment, so it's, it's emotional hunger. Internally, there's this emotional hunger that feels, as I said, when I am dissatisfied. I don't have enough. What I get is not enough. What I do is not enough. What I achieve is not enough. How much you tell me you love me, it's not enough. Our default mode is always to be dissatisfied. I mean, we could kind of see this, and we know some people, we say a glass half full type of person, always seeing what's wrong, but that's everybody. That's what dissatisfaction is, and that's the consequence of following attachment. So then naturally, if you feel you're not enough, I mean, that's the really primordial level. Not only do you not have enough, but you are even yourself not enough, and that's the self-loathing we all tend to have, I am not enough. It's a deeply serious mental illness, basically, but we've all got it. It's called samsara. Buddha calls it samsara. So naturally, because you feel you don't have enough and you're not enough, of course, the next level of attachment is this emotional hunger. You're hungry for something. Of course you are, because you haven't got enough. Literally hungry. Literally, it's an emotional hunger. Emotional hunger. I need more. So naturally, the first level of where you look for that thing to fill you up, it's the objects of the five senses. This is pretty obvious. And that's where in the middle scope of the Lam Rim, Buddha's main advice there is to see that and learn to harness that energy, learn to not follow that energy. It's tremendously difficult, because basically the Buddha's saying that it's not a moralistic issue. He's not saying, you're not allowed to have chocolate cake. He's not saying you're not allowed to have pleasure. Completely wrong. He's saying attachment misrepresents the cake, the object, the job, the person, whatever it might be. It misrepresents back to us. It makes it look more delicious than it is. And it's coming from this feeling in here of this emotional hunger of not being enough. And this is completely primordial. Your mother doesn't teach you this, I promise. It's automatic. So it's a shock to hear this analysis, the Buddha's analysis, because he is telling us we can get rid of this. He is telling us we can learn to be satisfied. We can learn to be content. That's what happens. That's what the giving up of attachment brings, quite literally. It's a tremendously hard job. It sounds easy. It's tremendously difficult because the habit is so deep. So this emotional hunger drives us constantly. Well, what's missing? There's a feeling of something's not enough, it's missing. So we go for the food, depending on your karmic habit. It could be food, it could be sex, it could be video games, it could be money, it could be power. It could, and the really heavy attachment is to harm others. Can you imagine waking up in this life with strong attachment to kill or steal? That's where the difficulty is. That's really intense. I mean, bad enough being attached to cake and boyfriends. But my goodness, at least we don't want to harm others. This attachment we have harms us, So it's always, so let's analyze then the mechanics of attachment. And this is something that's unique to the Buddhist psychological model. Well, actually, it comes from the genius Indian yogis before the Buddha. We all know that, as His Holiness says, you amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago, you're the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. And the model of the mind that is the basis of Buddha's model is coming from these previous yogis where that Buddha came out of, and he diverged in his own direction, in particular in relation to his own findings about the nature of self, the nature of reality, which of course comes to emptiness, So that we need to understand how this attachment works. What are the mechanics of it? And the way to understand that is to understand how the Buddhist model of the mind. So roughly speaking, that's relevant here because the literature is very extensive. There are there's the psychological model of the mind, and then there's the epistemological model. And the epistemological model explains in incredibly sophisticated detail the way the mind functions. It's totally fascinating. I'm quite sure modern scientists will be totally delighted and blown out by the sophistication of the epistemological model. But the difficulty for most modern people is because Buddha's not discussing the brain. He's discussing the actual internal, subjective, cognitive process itself. And that's unique to you Indians. You're the geniuses who invented this, and Buddha carries it on. So we have to understand this one. So simply speaking, in the epistemological model, there are two ways the mind functions, and these are crucial to understand. And second, we'll go into the psychological model and look into the actual details of how attachment works, okay, in a minute. So the first one is the mind functions basically at two levels, and from this perspective. One is the grosser level, which is the level we function at. No, start again. There's two levels. One is called mental consciousness, and one is called sensory consciousness. So clearly we know sensory, eye consciousness, ear consciousness, the 5 sensory consciousnesses, the individual ways that our mind works through the medium of the physical body. So consciousness, as we all know, by definition for the Buddha, is not physical. It's used synonymously broadly with the word mind. So eye consciousness is that part of your mind that works hand in hand with the eyeball, the nerves, and all the business, in order to have a cognition. The ear consciousness, same thing. And it's crucial to understand these are the very gross, this is literally gross consciousness. Literally, from the tantric model, you've got gross consciousness and subtle consciousness, and even got very subtle consciousness. Well, gross consciousness is the sensory consciousness, which is functioning through the medium of our physical body. So, of course, in the materialist world, that's tremendously powerful, and that's all we posit. We don't even posit a subtler level. We posit thoughts, but we think it's all a function of the physical, all a function of the brain. Absolutely not for the Buddha. So this grosser level, the sensory. And then we've got mental consciousness, which necessarily is more subtle. But of course, we access it in daily life, and that's including all our thoughts, all the intellectual concepts, all the thoughts, all the feelings, all the emotions, unconscious, subconscious, whatever you want to call this entire spectrum of our inner being. So it's crucial, first theoretically, to distinguish between sensory and mental. This is a massive, and there's a really good way to show that. So let's look at a simple example, okay? I'll take my thermos. You have to see it. There it is. So, funny images. So I chose that thermos because I like the design. Okay, I go online and it's a Kinto, it's made in Japan, and I like the design. So I would say I say to you, well, I see this thermos and it's a really well-designed thermos, it's a pretty thermos. So say like that. So naturally, without analysis, we're going to all assume that my eye consciousness is seeing a pretty thermos. Well, no, that's the point. No, not possible. This is crucial. The sensory consciousnesses, in fact, are profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition. Okay, eye consciousness is capable only of cognizing two things, shape and color, and that's it. So right there, if only what I'm seeing with my eyes is shape and color, then we all have to ask the obvious question, which part of my mind then is cognizing a pretty thermos? Well, that's your mental consciousness. And as Lama Zopa says, that's where the workshop is. That's what we have to learn to become super familiar with, okay? So the mental consciousness, so then you start to think, well, how come, what's the process here? Well, it's like this. Eyes go there, see that shape and color, and then in a billionth of a second, and I really mean it, quicker than Google, your mental consciousness is accessed. And what's your mental consciousness? That's where all the thoughts, all the feelings, all the emotions, all the interpretations, all the viewpoints, a million thoughts a second. That's where all that is. And this is what happens. In a billionth of a second, quicker than Google, the millisecond my eye consciousness sees shape and color, all my thoughts are stored in my memory. That's called a thermos. And because of my own taste, my attachment, my this, my that, it appears to me as a pretty thermos. So it's basically your mental consciousness. Now let's look at that. That's got two levels of functioning. And the grosser level, which is this level we function at day to day, is conceptuality. Now, this is a big surprise. conceptuality, that sounds fine. You're studying musical theory, you're studying math, that's conceptuality. We get that. But when you point here and you go feelings and emotions and anger and jealousy and attachment and love and compassion, and we say that's also conceptuality, that's a big shock. But this is the key in Buddhist psychology. If we get this, we will understand how we can work with attachment. So again, the epistemological model, we've got sensory and mental. That's it, sensory and mental. And then within the mental, you've got grosser level, conceptuality, and we only live at that level. We live at the tip of the iceberg of our mental consciousness. And that's all we posit in the modern world. That's all we posit in modern psychology. That's all we posit in neuroscience, conceptuality, thoughts, feelings, emotions, but they're all rooted in being conceptual thoughts, which we're going to go into. But there's a subtler level called perception, which is a general English word, but it's got a very specific definition here. By definition, perception, or they call it direct perception, in the mental consciousness is referring to a much subtler level of mind that we don't even posit as existing in modern psychology or neuroscience. But of course, the Indians and the Buddhists have discovered this through developing this single-pointed concentration. And we eventually have to access this subtler level of our mental consciousness in order to go beyond the conceptual level and have a direct non-conceptual insight into reality. And that doesn't even exist. That concept is completely unique to the Buddha, totally unique to the Buddha. And we don't access it. Unless you've got shamatha, you will not touch that subtle level of your mind. It's like the microscope of your mind. That's what we have to eventually get to. Meanwhile, we live at the grossest level of conceptuality. Now let's look at the psychological model, which is dealing exactly with the conceptual level of the mental consciousness, okay? All the thoughts and feelings and emotions and all of that. But let's see how literally all our thoughts and feelings and emotions, are rooted, are driven by, are rooted in conceptions, how they are rooted in being, thoughts, opinions, viewpoints, concepts. This is a big surprise. Some of us, you're studying music, it's very conceptual, initially, you learn all these complicated theories. Math, the most complicated theories, physics, all of that, incredibly sophisticated. They're all concepts. That seems clear. But when you get to emotions, and we point here, what are we talking about? Well, this is the model we're trying to look at. We're looking at the Buddhist model of the mind. And in Buddhist model of the mind, at the mental consciousness level, you've only got 3 categories of states of mind. The thousands and thousands of thoughts we have, they're all either negative, neurotic, delusional, ridiculous, and the cause of our suffering. They're rooted in being the ego grasping, maripa. Then you've got the positive or virtuous or reasonable states of mind, love, compassion, kindness. And the third lot, I like to call them the mechanics of our mind. And there's 3 distinct categories, and there's no 4th category. This is unique to the Buddha, I tell you. So let's look at the mechanical, I call it that. They're like concentration, intention, attention, discrimination, good memory, all of those parts of our mind that are neither in the first 2 categories, that are often referred to as non-virtuous and virtuous, negative and positive. And of course, in modern psychology, we don't like those terms because it sounds judgmental, but they've got a very specific meaning in Buddhist psychology. And we have to understand this if we want to understand Buddha's teachings, So the first lot, the negative, neurotic, I-based, fear-based, unhappy, distorted ones, the source of our pain, there's attached, and there's the 3 poisons, as we all know, thousands of them, but they all come down to the 3 poisons. Ignorance is the root one. Then there's attachment and aversion, attachment and anger. These 3 seem so simple, but they are primordially deep and really crucial to understand properly how they function. Then you have the positive ones, love, compassion. They're our saving grace. So those are negative and positive. But this third lot, the mechanics, they're neither negative nor positive, neither neurotic nor virtuous, but that's got a very specific meaning. They're the types of states of mind that enable us to function. So whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need good concentration. Whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need good attention, good volition, good concentration, good memory, good attention, all of these. These are necessary states of mind. But let's forget those for now and go back to the negative and the positive. And of those 2, let's look at the negative. This is where attachment is, okay? So, now, let's look at how attachment and anger, for example, are rooted in being concepts, and not only concepts but misconceptions, literally mistaken states of mind. This is the Buddha's view. So let's look at this, because we understand this, we can see the mechanics of it, how the mind works. We can really get to see how to work with attachment. Okay, I mean, it takes time. So, okay, the key function of the neurotic states of mind is that they misrepresent the external world back to us, as Lama Zopa puts it, or they are misconceptions, or they decorate, as Lama Zopa says, they decorate on top of the object. Let's say you're attached to chocolate cake, attached to the boyfriend, attached to the music, whatever the external, we're talking simple level of attachment, the external world, okay? So attachment coming from emotional hunger, that's where it's coming from. It's driven by this feeling of not being enough. But what it does, this idea of attachment, what it does, you hunger for something, what's missing, the chocolate cake. And then when you think of the chocolate cake, and then you go to get the chocolate cake, and your eyes see that shape and color, what appears to your mind is a ridiculously, totally exaggerated, delicious chocolate cake. The stronger your emotional hunger, the stronger your attachment, the stronger your dissatisfaction, the more divine the chocolate cake will literally look to you. And we kind of know this, when you're really hungry for that chocolate cake, or emotionally hungry for it, not just your stomach, it'll look totally divine on that plate, this divine, delicious thing, vibrating deliciousness at you, begging you to eat it. In other words, the more strong your emotional hunger is, the more strong your dissatisfaction, which is a function of attachment, the more exaggerated will attachment describe the cake back to you. It'll look totally divine. And of course, because of the emotional hunger, you just can't say no to it. I mean, when you're really literally addicted to something, that's what addiction is. Attachment is addiction. You can't stop thinking about it. One of the signs of attachment is you can't stop thinking about the object when it's not there. Well, look at us, food is a typical one. These days it mightn't be sex and drugs and rock and roll, but it could be video games. I mean, it's a very strong attachment. Our devices, not even just video games, but all the things that people have all day in their phones. That's called attachment. You can't leave it alone. You think about it, you want to touch it, you want to see it, you hear it go beep, you have to pick it up. That's called attachment, people. It's a simple level of attachment. It's not, you mightn't call it addiction, but basically it's addiction. Attachment is addiction. So, and so what's happening is it feels like you can't possibly say no to that cake. You can't possibly say no to that video game or that simple little beep on your phone. Because it's a feeling, isn't it, that if you don't get it, you have a panic attack. You've got to get it. You've got to get it. We know there's attachment. This is ordinary daily life. When we think in psychological terms about emotion, like addiction, we think of people down the other end who are alcoholic or junkies. No, we're all addicted. We're all addicts. It's a question of degree. And I really mean that. That's really a way of saying that Buddha would have liked that word addiction. It's the function of attachment. It's what it does. So obviously, if you feel you can't live without it for that second, it's sort of, you analyze that. It indicates that who you are this second, what I am at this moment in time, what I am in here, sitting in this chair, if I'm feeling hungry for the cake and hungry for the video game and hungry for that device, it's implying that who I am this second, this isn't enough. And that's where it's coming from. It's literally saying, I'm not enough. I don't have enough. So I've got to pick up the phone, got to have the cake, got to do this, got to go here, got to go there. It's driving us, in fact, every second. We don't notice. We just don't notice it. So that's why we're always dissatisfied. And that's why we're anxious. And that's why we're neurotic. This is the function of attachment. It's so totally pervasive in every ordinary person's daily life, And so the things we think of in the West, you can think of, even when it comes to people, codependence, that's attachment. Possessiveness, that's attachment. So many things all come down to being attachment. Even the busy mind, like what do they call it? OCD, for example, or ADHD, or all of those. That's all attachment. It's all a function of attachment. One of the functions, and this is where we get to really, when you think of ADHD, those types of things, That's really showing us how attachment is at the conceptual level. The thoughts that you just can't control. You can't control. Why? Because attachment is always saying I'm not enough. So we go from pillar to post like a little flitting little bird, never satisfied. Want this, then this, then this, then this. And that's what the mind's doing all day. All day the mind is doing this. I mean, really, we all recognize it. That's why we're anxious. That's why we're neurotic. That's why we're needy. That's why we get angry. It's attachment. This is attachment, people. So we can hear that at that level, the ADHD level, OCD, those types of things. You know, it's uncontrolled thoughts, uncontrolled thoughts, uncontrolled thoughts. That's a function of attachment, never satisfied. Almost like second by second, having that thought is not enough. So you've got to have more. What's missing? What's missing? It never stops. It's so subtle, you know. This is ordinary human life, people. Join the universe. Buddha's an expert at this. We think we're so clever in the West, coming up with these new ideas, ADHD and blah, 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 post-stress and whatever. Buddha's done this for a few thousand years, people. Come on. Just calls it one word, attachment. It sounds so simple. So let's look again how attachment then is driven by a concept. Okay, one way to put it is this. When we see a person who's fully into the throes of attachment energy, you know, like junkie or whatever, a stream, or even just video games, whatever. It doesn't seem like conceptual, does it? It feels emotionally like driven. We're emotionally driven to something, isn't it? So that's the emotional component. And then you look at anger, for example. When you see a person shouting and yelling and you see, oh, there's anger, or she's angry, you'd never think that when you hear that anger is based on being a concept, it sounds like a joke. So how are attachment and anger conceptual? Well, all of these states of mind we experience, remember I said before, the epistemological model, you've only got sensory and mental. Within the mental, you've got two levels, conceptuality and then subtle perception. Forget that, we never touch it. So we live at the level of conceptuality. There is no other. We live at the level of conceptuality. But put it this way, when the habits are very strong, when the misconception of attachment, misconception of anger, misconception of low self-esteem, we'll go into this in a minute, they're driving us, then we are only aware of them when we feel the emotion of it, which is when the body is involved. We don't even know what's in our mind until our body is shaking. We don't even know we're angry until the words vomit out the mouth. You don't even know you're depressed until you are inert in bed and can't move. In other words, we don't notice our thoughts until they hit the body, because the body plays a major role. That's why we think they're emotional, because the body feels them, the body's shaking, because we only notice them when they get to the level of the body. And that's just for the Buddha, that's just way too late. You know, it's just too late. So that's why the Buddha's brilliant skill, forget about getting samadhi, forget emptiness, forget bodhicitta, forget Buddhahood, just beginning to get some semblance of control over our emotions by having a simple technique every day to help us get some focus is a miracle already, can help us transform our minds, you know, and transform our lives. So what Buddha's giving us, as we know, is a simple technique called concentration meditation. It's a training. Even if 5 minutes every day, you do a strong focus. You train your mind to stay on your breath, for example. It's training. Don't expect concentration. What a joke. But you're training yourself to stay on one thing instead of just completely giving in automatically to the endless following every crazy thought like a little bird from pillar to post, which is how we spend our lives. You know, uncontrolled, completely uncontrolled. I mean, for me, it's a miracle when we're all not having mental breakdowns every day. Must have some merit, you know. So even beginning to start to pay attention to something like as simple as the breath, you know, the breath is an external phenomenon, and you just decide, I'm going to pay attention. You make a decision. And you train yourself to stay on the breath. So of course you're not going to stay there because your mind's crazy, but you're catching it. Your mindfulness is sitting next to you here. This is part of your mind that helps you bring yourself back to the present, back to the object. Your mind wanders off, and mindfulness brings it back to the breath. You pick yourself up again. You bring yourself back to the breath. You're training your attention to pay attention to the breath. So the training itself is already tremendous. You mightn't get much concentration, but you're training yourself not just to sink into mindlessly all the thoughts until they vomit out the mouth, you know. So at least the benefit of this in day-to-day life. Forget concentration. Don't worry about it. You know, you can hear when you're watching the breath, you can hear the thoughts. They never stop, isn't it? But that's good. Don't try to make them go away. That's not the goal. So you're watching your breath, and then you're training yourself to stay on the breath. You wander off, you bring yourself back to the breath. You bring yourself back to the breath. You're training. So the benefit of this already is tremendous, I tell you. As you get used to this, and you go down, you go to the kitchen after your meditation session, and there's your hubby slurping his coffee yet again. And normally, because you weren't aware of your mind, you'd be vomiting out the mouth. You know, I can't stand that slurping. Can you please shut up? Or if you're passive aggressive, you'll say something nasty, you know. But this time now, because you've been noticing, watching your breath, you can't help but notice the thoughts. So as you're going down the stairs, as you go into the kitchen, you're catching your thoughts. You're noticing the thoughts that would otherwise come out as anger, but you catch them. That's the skill we have to learn. And then what do you do with them? You catch them, you argue with them. That's it. That's the one. That's being your own therapist, as Lama Yeshe says. This is the biggest benefit of day to day, noticing your thoughts before they get to the emotional level. That's the key to success, I tell you. If you look at most people, most of us in our lives, we don't go around raping and killing too many people at all. But look at our mouths, among our family. That's where all the troubles are, isn't it? With your grandma, grandpa, auntie, uncle. And you Indians who live in about 4 generations together, no wonder you have problems, I mean, God, I'm sitting there on my own, living on my own, feeling so selfish, but I'll tell you, at least you don't fight with anybody. But our trouble isn't putting up with each other. We all know this. It's not next door neighbours, well, it can be, but it's your family, the ones you're close to, in your face every day. You even sleep in the same bed with each other. My God, no wonder you have problems. But the trouble is, attachment, of course, is the problem. Anger, of course, is the problem, but it's the expressing of it through the mouth that is the direct cause of the disharmony, and why it comes out our mouth, because we're not noticing what's happening inside, because we're not paying attention. So the point I'm getting at here is to realize, now let's look into to realize what's happening, but now let's see how the conceptual story of attachment and the conceptual story of aversion, why they're a problem. And this is the thing, as I said before, oh my gosh, my computer's going to run out. Hang on a second. I have to sit somewhere else. Oh no, I can plug it in. Hang on, I've got to get my little charger. Hang on. I hope this works. I hope it charges. Let's have a look. No. Oh yeah, look at it. It is just doing it. Fine. A little portable charger. Okay, let's look at how attachment and anger and all the other emotions, as we call them, are all rooted in being conceptual stories. So love and compassion are also conceptual stories, but at least they're not distorted. They're valid and reasonable, and they're rooted in dependent arising. But attachment and anger are I-based, neurotic, fear-based, and they are basically lies. So let's look at that. So attachment, as I said, emotionally is this emotional hunger, missing something, so you crave the object. But from the starting of the craving, already what attachment is doing is exaggerating. Attachment is exaggerating the deliciousness of the cake and exaggerating the function of the cake in you getting happy. So in other words, what we have to learn to hear is that story happening in the mind. It's very hard because it just feels emotional, So basically, attachment is a concept, and the definition of attachment is it's a conceptual thought that exaggerates the deliciousness of the object. The definition of anger or aversion, the bare bones state of mind, is a conceptual thought that exaggerates the ugliness of the object. So these two poisons, we go between these 1,000 times a day, So attachment is this emotional hunger that's driving everything we do, expecting that cake to make me happy. You can't wait for it. The cake even looks delicious. When you've got your attachment glasses on, literally, we know this, literally the cake looks way more divine than it really is. And we know that's true because your husband can't stand chocolate cake. So he's got his aversion glasses on, and what appears to him as something disgusting. We know this, but we sort of don't join the dots. We just kind of joke about it. It's literally because in my mind, coming from the emotional hunger, the neediness, the feeling I'm lacking, then my attachment arises emotionally, and then it is exaggerating the deliciousness of that cake. It appears delicious, and then of course you can't resist it. And then of course we know what'll happen is you're expecting all that happiness to come. Happy feelings do come at the first mouthful, no question, but right then attachment is still not satisfied. Attachment saying it's not enough, Robina, have another piece. Not enough, have a second piece and a third piece, and attachment's still not satisfied. That's the tragedy. It never gets satisfied. It can't be satisfied because it's a lie. So what happens is after the third piece, it's gradually, that cake, as we can see, it gradually turns from a delicious looking cake to a disgusting cake. Why do you think you stop eating? Because your stomach is full, and now the cake, now you've got your aversion glasses on, and that's exaggerating the ugliness of the cake. We know this process. We know this. So attachment is emotional, the feeling of it, but it's because of the habit of countless lifetimes of the misconception that exaggerates the deliciousness, So it's only emotional now because we've practiced believing in that concept for so many lifetimes. That's the point. That's the point, A person who doesn't have much attachment to cake, to food, for example, doesn't have that emotional hunger, So therefore the cake won't look more delicious than it really is, and they won't particularly care if they have it. So the thing is, the emotion is there because of practicing, believing in that misconception, attachment, believing the thing is more delicious than it really is. It's just a deep primordial habit we have built up, And all the unhappy emotions are like that. So arrogance, for example, pride, is a conceptual thought that exaggerates the importance of myself. We don't like to think we've got that, but it's there. And then when it's flipped over, it's a conceptual thought called low self-esteem that exaggerates my bad qualities. If you've got, say, for example, arrogance. Arrogance. That's exact. So each of the delusions has a particular function, the particular conceptual story, and they each exaggerate, they exaggerate something. So arrogance exaggerates your importance. Low self-esteem exaggerates your unimportance. Attachment exaggerates deliciousness. Aversion exaggerates ugliness, We can see this. And that's why they're called literally misconceptions. Misconceptions. We know when we talk about how unhappy we are, how depressed because your boyfriend left you and he thinks you're a creep. So we all think we're a creep. We really see our bad qualities more than our good. This is a function of delusions. It's a function of them. And this is the tragedy. And that's why they're called misconceptions. They are misconceptions. They're not true. So that's why one of the practices, when you're catching your mind and you hear that slurping, of the coffee, which triggers your aversion, which means it appears in an exaggeratedly bad way to you. And also the really crucial point here to understand is aversion is the response in your mind to when your attachment doesn't get what it wants. We can begin to see the relationship between attachment and aversion. I tell you, we are on track in understanding Buddhist psychology. It's tremendous. It sounds so simple. It is tremendously powerful. Because attachment is always there, wanting something, not happy, wanting something more. And then when it doesn't get it, the slurping is not what your attachment wants. So immediately it appears ugly, your aversion arises, and then you get unhappy, We're doing this 1,000 times a day. But the other thing about attachment too, it's coming from the emotional hunger. It exaggerates the deliciousness of whatever it is you're hankering after. It then expects, this massive expectation, the expectation to get that result that you want. And then the panic attack when you don't, which is anger, it causes you to then possess that thing as yours, the cake, the person, the money. You become greedy and grasping. All of that's a function of attachment, It's kind of multifaceted. But the really heavy level of attachment, which sounds very depressing, another way of saying what attachment is at a most basic level is it's this frantic emotional hunger to only get the nice things. Attachment is very fragile. It makes it like a fragile baby. It can only cope with everything being lovely. Attachment is a junkie for everything to be lovely. It can't stand problems. And now we're getting to staying steady no matter what. It can't stand things, and this is where it shows how self-centered it is. Attachment cannot stand anything that isn't nice. And what does not nice mean? It means what I think is not nice. In other words, it's totally self-centered. Attachment only wants what I want every millisecond. I mean, it's hard to hear this because it's so natural. It causes us so much pain, but it's absolutely necessarily self-centered. It only wants what I want 24 hours a day. It only wants what is lovely. And what is lovely is what I think is lovely, isn't it? Of course it is, by definition. I mean, if we have, if in our world, if you had so much attachment but not much virtue, you'd be what the world called a narcissist or even a psychopath, even worse, So luckily we've got virtues that are like our saving grace, that tamp down our delusions. We can access our love, patience, kindness, generosity, forgiveness, good ethics. They're all our saving grace. They can help us calm down our attachment. But it's there at the top all the time, isn't it? Bubbling. And that's why we have panic attacks the moment bad things happen. The politics, the family, the fighting, the ugly food, the things going wrong, the bad things like people dying. This is why we suffer. You can't suffer if you only have love and compassion. If you only have virtues, by the time you've realized emptiness and you only got virtue and bodhicitta and compassion, you would not suffer necessarily. Suffering comes from delusions. This is Buddha's point, but it's hard to hear it because delusions are so pervasive and so natural in daily life and natural according to our psychology, in the modern world. You'd be weird in our modern views if you didn't have attachment. But so Buddha's view is quite dramatic, really. And it's not as if you can learn to hate yourself, but you have to understand why you suffer. And Buddha says very simply in the Four Noble Truths, you suffer, honey, because you've got attachment, So I've talked for quite a bit. Better ask me some questions. And I talk very fast because I want to fit a lot of information in our short time. So now ask me some questions while I have a drink. Come on, ask me some questions. Anybody, any question, I don't mind. Nothing there oh, good, come on then, talk to me.
SK, you can...
Yes, go on, talk to me, good.
So Venerable, I have this doubt coming up, when you're looking at the dependent arising, where craving and attachment are the 8th and 9th link.
Yes.
Then after what you'd explained, when the contact happens as the 6th link,
yes,
and then feelings appear at the 7th link. So at that time, when we're talking about the 5 omniscient factors which are present,
yes.
So at that time, are we saying that when contact, attention, feeling, discrimination, and intention happen, with my wisdom of, say, anicca, anatta, and dukkha, discrimination level is where I can break the chain?
My feeling is if you keep it more simple, forget the 5, always forget those. If we look at the 12 links, and you've got, you've got the contact is made with the mind contacts with the object. The next millisecond, and this is an interesting point, depending on the intensity of your karmic connection with that object, then feeling arises, either pleasant or unpleasant. So if really strong pleasure arises, then the next billionth of a second, attachment kicks in and then paints the whole thing as divine. This happens in the millionth of a second. The real one to break is, the powerful one is to not believe, as Lama Zopa puts, don't believe in that karmic appearance of delicious. Stop that happens in a billionth of a second. But the key one right there, as Lama Zopa puts it, is don't believe in that karmic appearance. Knowing attachment is exaggerating. Theoretically, you know that. Knowing it arises a delicious feeling, and then attachment paints a divine picture, and you have to catch it right there. Do not believe that karmic appearance. This is putting an atomic bomb under it. Do you hear me?
So yeah, so at a feeling level, if I'm looking at say just a body sensation which is coming in, which can, but it's my perception which is then grading it as pleasant and unpleasant. So at that stage, with my wisdom of anicca, can I not react to it?
Yes,
So then
and that's,
attachment and craving will not come. So I'll
no,
break the chain.
but I just
Yeah.
gave you this. Lama Zopa's way of putting it is the way of cutting it completely. Of course, the feeling arises, the feeling of, but it's easier to say it like that. Okay, listen to this example, for example. I'm always using the example of this little boy one time years ago. The mother came crying about her little boy because he'd been fishing all his life and he had died at the age of 29. And so she was crying. And I remember she and her boy, from the time, so I use him as an example, a strong example of attachment to something like harming. That's where it's harming. So there he is. He's never thought of fishing before. One is a little boy, he's taken fishing, so contact is made. And because of the intensity of his past karmic connection with killing, that equals the intensity of the pleasant feeling that arises, and the next burns of a second, attachment painting a totally divine picture. So of course he's not able to resist. It's impossible because he's now found the purpose of his life because it appears divine to him and the feelings are delicious. So again, all I'm saying is the simplest way to put it, as Lama Zopa says, it's all happened in a billionth of a second. The cake is there. Pleasant feeling arises. Pleasant feeling, mental and physical, because we're so excited. And then attachment makes it look divine. But you catch and you say, no, don't believe in that karmic appearance of divine. Right there is you catch it. Right that second. It's intensely difficult. But that's where you put an atomic, that's applying emptiness right there, the most direct antidote. Don't believe in your karmic appearances. It's very direct, it's powerful. Of course, it's tremendously hard because the hand is already on the cake and it's in the mouth, And if you even know intellectually, this for me I find very powerful, talking to one Lama, young Rinpoche, and we were discussing, and I said, is it true that the intensity of the pleasant feeling that arises in your mind is equal to the intensity of the past karma? And when you understand that, that's why we are like lemmings. We have no control. That boy, he wasn't an evil boy, but he must have had very strong karma to kill, because the second he meets it at the age of 5, he falls in love with fishing right there. And that means because of attachment, he never saw suffering. And that's the total tragedy. So I think catching it, when we know that process, contact, feeling arises, the intensity of the pleasure, and then attachment kicks in and makes it look divine, and then catch. Don't believe in that karmic appearance. That's Lama Zopa's advice. I find that very tasty. Do you understand, SK?
Right.
Does that fit with your little analysis? Does it fit with your analysis?
Yeah, no, my way of looking at it is, of course, I'm coming from the Goenkaji system. So when I'm looking at my physical sensation,
but that's Buddha's teachings, isn't it?
Yeah. So when I'm looking at my physical sensations and I'm sitting with them, and then it's my perception and discrimination which says pleasant and unpleasant. And that's where, when it says, when my perception says pleasant, craving kicks in. When it grades it as unpleasant, aversion kicks in.
I know, but that's sitting on your cushion is easy. We're talking about being in front of the cake. We're talking about being in front of that boy. If you're very attached to sex, I'm talking about intense attachments. Even intense attachments, that we can analyze it and not believe in it. If sitting on your cushion, that's lovely. It's necessary practice, yes. But when you're in front of the cake, in front of the divine boy, in front of that video game that you can't resist, don't believe in the karmic appearance. Don't believe in that perception.
So, but when you're training on the cushion, would that help then, of course, in your daily life? So at that time, my perception kicks in, and then I say anicca, dukkha, anatta, and then I don't believe the pleasant and unpleasant, and that's where I cut the chain of craving and attachment.
No, stop. No, it is pleasant. No, they are not wrong. Pleasant is pleasant. Unpleasant is unpleasant. But
that's my perception grading it, right? Venerable, is where my doubt is. It's my perception based on past memory, which is, if a feeling is coming, some might find it pleasant, some might find it unpleasant, but it's my perception.
We're discussing the karmic appearance is No, feeling arises. The intensity of the pleasant feeling for that little boy was because of his past karma of killing. That seeing fishing, contact with fishing triggers a very pleasant feeling. But the next one is attachment kicking in, and attachment's job is to paint a divine picture. That's when, as Lama Zopa says, that's the picture of divineness. Don't believe in that. The pleasant is pleasant. You can't argue. That's not a lie. Pleasant is neither negative nor positive. It's a natural response because of habit. But the one to not believe is the karmic appearance of deliciousness, of exaggeration created by attachment. That's the one
But
I'm talking
the contaminated karmas is the second link, but the first link is the self-grasping ignorance, right, Venerable? So they're both kicking in, right?
Stop. But what are you asking
Okay.
now? You're asking something else. What's your
So,
question?
so at that stage of feeling stage, I'm saying by the time feeling comes at link 7, karmic contaminated karmas and self-grasping ignorance is already the first and second of the chain of dependent origination, right?
Darling. What's your question, SK? What's the question now?
No. What I'm saying is I'm looking at where at the
SK,
feeling stage
SK,
can I break the change.
I want a question from you. I need a question now. We've looked at one thing. You have another question now. What is your question, SK? If there's no question, just you having your comment, that's okay.
Okay, no, I'm presently confused where I can break the chain at the feeling stage, and that's where I thought about
That's
the
what I
5
said.
evolution factors.
No, not at the
No,
feeling
okay.
stage. It's too
Okay.
quick. You've got a craving has to come because of the feeling is pleasant. The feeling is pleasant. And why
Right.
it's pleasant is because you've had the habit of, pretend it's killing, okay? Because you've had the habit of killing. The pleasant does arise. Then attachment or craving kicks in, and that is what makes an exaggerated picture of how beautiful it is. I'm not discussing the pleasant. I'm discussing the next one, which is the picture of divineness that attachment then paints on fishing. And that's the one where you catch and say, don't believe that picture because it's a misconception.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thanks, Venerable. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Anybody else there? Venerable. Kumpen, no? This all happens too quick. It's like a million. All this is a millionth of a second. It needs a lot of practice, a lot of courage to do like what Lama Zopa is saying. No more questions on this room there, in there?
Not right now, Venerable Robina.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Oh, Nicola.
Hello.
Yes, talk to me.
Hi. Thank you so much for that interesting talk.
Sure.
I've just returned back from the introduction to Buddhism at Tashita,
Yes.
and I'm struggling to integrate what I've learned into kind of my work environment, I guess. And
Yes.
I'm self-employed and I run my own little massage yoga business.
Yes.
And is there a way that I can want to like grow and develop my business, and I have to kind of push and try and get clients so that I can pay my bills and stuff?
That's
Is there
right.
a way I can be ambitious?
I understand. So listen, what we're talking here is, and as SK is discussing, they're the teachings at the first level of practice. They're the teachings of, broadly speaking, the Theravadan teachings of Lord Buddha. But then we have the next level. We also have the Mahayana teachings. So what we're discussing so far is the Theravadan teachings, and in the Tibetan tradition, they're the first scope of the Lam Rim are the teachings that we share with the Theravadan path. All about the nuts and bolts of the Four Noble Truths, what is attachment, what is suffering. So now the next level of practice, which is you can apply if it suits you, is you understand attachment, you understand all that stuff. So then if you're going to do all that activity, the crucial thing now is to make your motivation a virtuous motivation. So you think, okay, I want to run this business. Why do I want to do this? It's not going to help me get enlightened. Just massaging people in its nature is not, it can easily be attachment. It's okay for you. Most of the things we do are driven by attachment. Our need for money, our need for food, all these are driven by attachment. This is how we are. So what you do is you add some compassion to the mix, and you think, okay, I need to work. I want to become a better human being. I want to work on my mind. I want to give up attachment. I want to develop love and compassion. And so you think, well, I'm doing this so I can become a better human being, so I can be useful to others. So straight away, that motivation causes your normal activity of making money, which everyone does, into something virtuous. Because the key one now to understand is karma. So we have to discuss that for a moment, and that'll give the explanation. So karma Every action we do, every millisecond of anything we think and do and say, you could argue is a karma, if you like, an action, and it drops a seed into our bank vault. I like to use that example. Everything we think and do and say, none of it goes astray. Everything we think and do and say, really, this is the karmic process, is the process that produces the person we become and produces our future results. So the key to this one, this is the point now, Nicola. In general, the key factor, and I'm using these words very precisely, the key factor in every action we do that determines whether it will be called a negative or a positive action, which in turn will determine the karmic seed it drops into our bank vault, which in turn results in the type of action of happiness or suffering in the future. Are you with me, Nicola? That process, the key factor isn't even the action. The key factor is the motivation that drives the action we do. So you could do a job of healing people every day, but maybe you're really self-centered. Your main motivation is attachment. Your main motivation is to make as much money as possible. Well, that means every action you do is samsaric, is negative, can only cause you future suffering. Whereas if you could do the most simple thing of doing the dishes with a pure motivation, with a wish to be humble, to help others, to be a good human being, that motivation causes the action of doing the dishes to become a virtuous action. So the motivation that drives everything we do is the main factor that determines the result of the action. Are you with me, Nicola? So that has to be an intentional, conscious thing. We're all driven by attachment, is how we are. So we add extra on top of that. So in your daily practice, you think, okay, I'm going to go to work today. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get that. And I'm going to have money and have to have food and blah, 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 and a house. So all of those are samsaric in their nature. They're not going to get you enlightened. But I'm going to do this and utilize these things in my life so I can become a better human being, so I can be a benefit to others. Then your motivation becomes more altruistic. So an altruistic motivation makes whatever action you do more powerful. You with me? That's the bottom line. That's how you can utilize daily life. Otherwise, it's all just rubbish. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, thank you.
But you remember it has to be part of your programming and part of your practice every day. Because when you create, you see, the thing is, in the actual process of creating karma, there are several components that are in place whenever we do something. So let's just say it's an action of eating breakfast. Eating breakfast is called an action. So what's involved? Well, first of all, there's the object, which is the food. Then there's your mind, and this is a crucial point, your mind involved in it. There's intention, I will eat the breakfast, and then it's driven by a motivation. So 99% of the time, it's attachment that drives us to eat our breakfast. But here you shift that, and you make it a virtuous motivation. You make it even a bodhicitta motivation, or even you make it a motivation of renunciation. I'm just going to eat what I need so that I can be healthy. That changes that shifts the attachment. You add that virtuous motivation to it, then you finish the action, and then you've just done a karmic action driven by renunciation, driven by bodhicitta, or driven by emptiness. That's what changes the character of the action. Are you hearing what I'm saying, Nicola? It's quite technical. There's always a motivation that drives everything we do, and if we're not being conscious, it's always attachment. Or aversion. It's always a delusion because it's just how we are. So you consciously add on top of that a virtuous motivation, and that redeems the action. Because motivation is the key factor that determines the character of the action we do. That is to say, literally, whether it's so-called negative or so-called positive. That's, again, the analysis, Nicola. Do you understand?
Yeah, I think so. I need to process it.
No, absolutely, you must. That's exactly right. Exactly.
Thank you.
So just remember, when you eat, sleep, go to the toilet, have sex with your boyfriend or whoever you have sex with, or anybody at all, you do it with a pure motivation. It's really not kidding, you know. You've got to be conscious. And you put that motivation in. Why am I doing this? So I can become a better human being. Why am I doing this? So I can help others. Instead of just following mindlessly, doing what we feel like, which is doing what attachment feels. Do you see what I'm saying? It's programming your mind. It's got to be intentional. Okay. Who else? Neil. Hello, Neil. Yes, talk to me.
I wanted to ask about attachment and also warm-heartedness.
Yes.
Are they contradictory?
Oh, okay. In theoretically, if we look at the analysis of the mind in Buddhist psychology, it's very clear. There are these first two categories. There are those that are delusional, disturbing, neurotic, misconceptions, and if they drive mostly what we do, they can only cause our suffering and cause us to harm others. And they're called attachment, aversion, and all the others, okay? And they're the pretty primordial ones. Then you've got the positive ones, the virtuous ones, the open-hearted, the kind-hearted, generous, loving, compassionate. They are the positive qualities. They are our saving grace. So technically, yes, attachment, and what was the term you used again? Oh, kind-hearted?
Warm-hearted.
Warm-hearted, that's another word for compassion or love. Would you agree with that, Neil? Would you agree with that? Keep your thing open. Yeah, good. Perfect. So then technically they're opposite states of mind. Yes, of course they are. But because attachment's so primordial and so automatic and so natural and there all the time, often what happens is we confuse attachment with, say, kindness, warm-hearted. So, if I've got a boyfriend, let's say, and I say, oh, I love my boyfriend, well, love is the wish that the boyfriend be happy. It's a delight in his happiness. It's altruistic, and that's a valid, virtuous, appropriate state of mind. And then I've got attachment, but that's mixed with it so totally I don't even notice the difference. So the attachment in me pollutes my kindness. It pollutes my warm-heartedness. It makes, but it's very hard to see the difference. So they technically are totally contradictory, yes, but, one step at a time. You see my point, Neil?
Yeah, so you're saying attaching to say a person is all right as long as your intentions are correct and you're warm-hearted about even the fact that you are in a way going out there to meet that person or whatever. And so I mean, yeah, that's basically what I'm asking.
I understand. So when we understand this Buddhist analysis, attachment is very subtle and very primordial and very natural and very deep, and it's the source of our pain. So if we mainly are just following attachment, let's say I'm going to meet a nice boyfriend, if I'm not looking at kindness, if I'm not looking at my love and compassion, if I'm not looking at my warm-heartedness, if I've got a lot of attachment, that means I'm craving to get another friend, and so I think about what I can do, and then I meet the friend, and and it's all attachment mostly. But if I want to have a relationship, then as long as you have love and kindness and warm-heartedness and compassion and empathy and patience and all of that in the relationship, then that will counteract the attachment. It will calm the attachment down because attachment is necessarily self-centered. But you can see in some relationships, attachment runs the show. So people get angry, they fight, they hate each other because your attachment's not getting what it wants. But attachment is totally self-centered, is I-based, but we've also got the good ones. So we practice developing the good ones that can calm the attachment down. Are you seeing my point, Neil?
Yeah, I mean, you could be attached to, the fact that His Holiness is giving a meeting or somebody holy is giving their meeting, and then you want to take your best friend there or your girlfriend there. So, I mean, how much is that an open action, like an open mind? How much is that?
I think, Neil, the key, the way you're asking the question, it really shows the Buddhist view of attachment is quite subtle. Until we are highly advanced, Neil, until we practically realized emptiness or got bodhicitta, we're going to be driven by attachment. It's just naturally self-centered. It's naturally self-centered, but it doesn't mean it dominates the whole of you. If you've got kindness and you want to take your friend to the Dalai Lama's teaching, wow, amazing, go for it. But attachment is the problem. When you see, if you've got your sister and and you're attached to getting what you want, and you're having an argument, because why? Because your attachment's not getting what it wants, so you shout and yell at your sister. That's because of attachment. If you have a girlfriend and then she doesn't do what you want every second, and so you get angry, that's because of attachment. That's when the real suffering of attachment is obvious, when it doesn't get what it wants, and because anger is the response. So if you're attached to going to that meeting of the Dalai Lama and your friend turns up late and you get angry with them, then it proves you had attachment. So anger is the sign that you have attachment, because it doesn't get what it wants. So it's hard to see it until then. But it's natural, we've all got it. So practicing kindness, practicing affection, practicing love and warm-heartedness, that's fantastic. That counteracts attachment. That's great. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Good. But attachment is very subtle, so we can't be, one step at a time. What else? Anybody else have a question? Hello, Ishani, yes.
Yes, thank you so much, Venerable.
Yes. Yes.
So this is today's topic was to study the mind. And like as you explained, we can stop our action right there when that attachment comes. But this is about physically, getting something that you are attached with. How do you study the mind process? Like if there are attachments mentally also, which makes you angry or makes you sad or makes you
Yes.
happy.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So the question is, so go on. See, that's in general, that's the point.
Yes.
Attachment is very deep inside us. We mightn't even notice it. And suddenly, because you don't realize that you're craving to be warm, and then the person turns the heater off and you get cold. So anger arises, So that's the whole point. So then that's why staying steady when attachment doesn't get what it wants, we have to be conscious. You have to notice. You order that kind of coffee in the restaurant and they give you a wrong coffee. So we mightn't even know that you're attached to getting it until you don't get it. And then you get annoyed. That's the moment when we can learn to catch it. That's what I'm saying. Of course, it's hard. It's extremely subtle, And we can work on the grossest level and at least control the mouth. Don't say the words. That takes a lot of awareness, but that at least you don't harm others as well. But catching, like I was saying before to Neil, we don't know, the attachment to get what I want every second is very deep in all of us. So the real point is when attachment doesn't get what it wants, which is the opposite to what I want, the bad weather, the unhappy word from the husband, the wrong food, the small things, that's when the moment to catch it is. Go, my attachment just didn't get what it wanted. Be careful, Robina. And then the next process is because what happens is it's like attachment has a panic attack when it doesn't get the right thing. That's what anxiety is. So we have to be brave and face that problem. And that's the next level of practice, having the courage to face the problem, to see it for what it is, and know you're not going to lose the plot, because bad things are always going to happen. Bad weather, bad politics, the husband being unkind, your grandmother being horrible. We all know that in daily life. So if we can catch it the moment the bad thing happens, that's the moment to catch it. It's very hard practice, but it's pretty profound. Do you understand me, Ishani? It needs intention and practice every day. And at least first, control the mouth. 90% of our problems wouldn't exist if we could control our mouth, I promise. Do you understand? Good. One step at a time. It's not easy. What else there? Venerable Courtin, anything? 12, 20 minutes. We have 20 minutes left. No, we have more than that. 12, 20, 11. What time did we do it? Oh, yeah.
Robina, can I ask another question?
Yeah.
Just following on from what you said about controlling the mouth, I feel like a fine line between kind of suppressing emotions and, like you said, like pausing and taking time and processing it mentally. And I don't know, maybe you could speak a little bit more on that line of.
What's that first thing you said? Suppressing, you said. What do you mean? So what do you mean?
Like, and I feel like that's something you don't want to do, is kind of suppress something.
So what you have to tell me very clearly what you mean by suppressing, though, darling.
Like
give
say,
an example. Give a simple example of a scenario.
Yeah, or just say anger arises and you kind of just try to. You're like, oh no, I don't want to be an angry person. So you try to.
Okay. I hear you now. Okay, so I think much of the time, we're not even aware of our mind, and that's part of our problem. We're not even we're not noticing what's happening. That's why either the usual responses we have, I think, we're either the kind of person who will just vomit out what they feel and get angry, or the other kind of person who's a more patient kind of person that's when suppression happens, I think. When this is before you start to practice, when you're not practicing in normal life. You've got angry people who vomit out what they feel. And then you have people who have got a quiet nature. Their aversion also arises, but they push it away. So that's what suppressing is, when you're literally unconscious. So now when you start to practice, you don't want to say the bad words. Not, oh, I don't want to be bad angry, but I don't want to say the bad words. So you are literally not saying the bad words, but you're not suppressing anything. You're controlling your thoughts and you are controlling your speech, but you're in charge of the process. That's excellent. You need to do that. Like, you know that yourself. If you're learning anything, you have to do that. When you're trying to learn yoga, you're consciously refraining from putting your foot in the wrong direction. That's not called suppression. You're trying to do the right thing. That's training your mind. So when you're in charge of your mind, it might be hugely hard effort to not say those words. That's not suppression. That's excellent practice. It's got to be conscious. Do you understand me?
Yeah, thank you.
But a part of the problem also is because the deepest attachment we've got, which is not even what we've discussed here, is the attachment to being seen as a good girl. That could be a big problem, Nicola. That means we won't say the angry words because we don't want to be disliked. Well, that's a crummy motivation. That's not going to help. Do you understand me? And we want everyone to love us, so that's a big problem. That's another whole discussion, though. Hello, Shyama. Talk to me.
I have a question regarding karma and motivation. Like every day, not every day, like twice a week, I want to clean my balcony. It has a lot of plants. And so when I sweep it up, there are lots of ants and tiny insects. And I don't want to disturb them, but I leave the dust there and they still don't get away from it. And I have to eventually
I know.
collect it and throw it away.
I know, Shyama. But I think, is it just ants? They're the only creatures who come? Ants?
I don't know. There are all of these small bugs from the soil that get out.
I know. You see, the thing is, I mean, we know, I think we do know, don't we? I mean, the way the Buddhist view is and the Hindu view, that there's so many sentient beings that we can't even see. Our body itself is like a walking zoo. And the creatures you see there are only still the biggest ones. There are tiny creatures, even just walking, breathing, we are harming others. So I think the broader idea, if we have this wish not to harm others driving us, which is pretty tremendous, is we do what we can. You've got to be reasonable and have a clean house and maybe a clean balcony. So you just have to be extra careful. Do the best you can. I mean, just to sweep them up gently doesn't have to mean you have to kill them, does it? You can just throw them away. That's okay. You're not going to kill them. In other words, you do your best, Shyama. I think once we really have made the decision to consciously not harm, then it means you can't guarantee you won't kill. You can't guarantee that, but you do your best to not harm. We do our best, Shyama. It's really important. That's all I can say.
But the problem I also have is not harming them. I am pretty careful when I do it, but I don't want to remove them from their community of ants. And I see all these communities.
If that's the case, then Shyama, you have no choice. You can't clean your balcony if that's the case. If you want to leave the ants there and you love the ants more than anything, then that's pretty tremendous. But I don't know. Aren't ants flexible? Do they really have families? Won't they meet another family somewhere else? I don't know about ants.
But what motivation can I have when I'm doing this so I don't incur very bad karma?
I know. I mean, Shyama, look, like I said before, if you are intending to clean the balcony and you're intending to sweep them up gently and not kill them, and then you're intending to put them somewhere else, you do it with the best motivation to not harm them. And then you blow, and maybe also you say mantra and you blow on them and bless them. So one day they meet the Buddha. There's much you can do to not harm and even to benefit. So you have to just weigh it up. Every decision, we have to weigh it up. Be sensible and be brave and do your. But I think blowing mantra on the answer. I mean, Lama Zopa would say even a bone that's 1,000 years old, because of the strength, the power of the Sanskrit sounds, the mantras, that's what they say, because of the power of those sounds is so beneficial. You saying mantra, you bless your breath, you blow on that bone. The power of mantra is such, Lama Zopa says, that even that consciousness, wherever it is, 1,000 years ago from where it is now, that consciousness will get the benefit. So Lama Zopa would always say, that if saying mantra can be the most beneficial thing for those creatures, maybe you just don't harm them, but saying a mantra and blessing them gives them the opportunity to meet the Buddha one day. So that makes it so beneficial, not just not harmful.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
Lucky ants that they met you then. Okay.
Thank
What
you.
else, people? Okay, darling. Someone else. I think my computer's running out. Oh no, should be okay. Anybody else there? Kunpen, Venerable Kunpen? Nothing? Nothing? So, okay, so let's talk a bit more about really now the simple thing of how we can face the problems. This is really, honestly, it's not even really taught until the first one is to really play safe and be careful and watch your speech and don't respond. But the deeper one is the more subtle one, really. As Lama Zopa says about not believing in your karmic appearance, this is more profound, really. This is really applying emptiness. So if you can think about the problem, a problem by definition, if you think about it, a problem for any one of us by definition is when attachment doesn't get what it wants. We got to understand this, we have to. I mean, this is the really purest way to put it. Things don't exist out there from their own side as a problem. We might think, well, of course a war is a problem in its nature. Yes, it is for the people in the war, but in our seeing that war appearing to us, it's very much to do with our own perception. If it's attachment there or anger or whatever it is, So that's what we're talking about here. So a problem for us is when our attachment doesn't get what it wants. We have to understand that's the analysis the Buddha's showing. So then, of course, that means 1,000 times a day you're going to hear the sound that your attachment doesn't like. The husband will say words you don't like. The children won't do what you want. The traffic is terrible. Your boss is mean. The simple, ordinary examples of ordinary life. That's when our attachment is confronted. And that is the moment that aversion arises. The bare bones state of mind beneath anger or depression, or even polite versions, annoyed, irritated, upset, frustrated. We all know those experiences. They are all variations of anger, and anger is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. This is, in the Buddha's view, an absolute. That's the very nature of what attachment and aversion are. In other words, if you realize emptiness, forget about just getting renunciation. If you realize emptiness, literally things won't appear to you that way. You'll see a war, you'll see the husband's ugly voice, you'll see the child do the bad action, but because your mind doesn't have attachment or anger, you won't respond in the same way. We've got to realize this, we are driven by these two day-to-day poisons. It's automatic. It's not just attachment is there sometimes. It just drives all of us all the time. And it's the one that drives everything. And then when it doesn't get what it wants, which is, that's when aversion arises. And that's when we have to practice keeping steady. That's when we have to practice keeping steady. It's easy to keep steady when your attachment gets what it wants. If you're in a house where everybody does what you like, the sounds are lovely, the food is delicious, the husband doesn't slurp his coffee, you'll always be happy. Of course you will. It's easy. So the problem is when your attachment doesn't get what it wants. That's the moment to catch. And of course, it's tremendously difficult. It's tremendously difficult. So if we are able to stay steady in the face of a problem, you won't have stress. You won't get depressed. You won't get angry. I mean, it's really incredible. We'll forget about, again, emptiness, but just that we can catch that and know this analysis, that things appear bad to us because we have attachment. When a thing appears bad, is because attachment just didn't get what it wanted, and now aversion arises, and it will look ugly. And then that's when we go up and down like a yo-yo, isn't it? Oh my God, the drama's happening, the traffic this, husband that, children that, grandma that. This is daily life. Forget the serious problems like war and murders. It's ordinary daily life. This view of attachment and aversion, it seems so simple. It is profound, you know. So that's why the very first level of practice, I mean, in the very first level, as we know in the Lam Rim, the very first stages of practice, don't even think about your mind yet. Just control the servants of your mind. And what are the servants of your mind? Your body and your speech. So I said to you, in our families, if we could control the speech, 90% of our problems would not exist. But it demands incredible effort, incredible discipline, living in vows every day, practicing every day, purifying every day. This is tremendous. And then, of course, practicing compassion after that, you know. But controlling our body and speech first. This is the first level of Lord Buddha's practice. Control your body and speech. They are the servants of your mind. Then you have the luxury of beginning to learn to meditate so you can harness the energy of your mind itself. What do you think, people? A few minutes to go. What else? Any other questions? This is all hard work, people. We've been hearing it for thousands of years. This is really hard work. So that's why, as you know, as Kay said before, sitting on the cushion, excellent. We need a daily practice. We need training. You know, we need to be training ourselves first. Then we come down to the kitchen and deal with life. Got to have your training on your cushion, definitely. No question. Of course, all the other practices too, the purification practices, why purification is tremendously powerful, why saying mantras can be helpful, doing our prostrations, doing all those practices can be hugely purifying for our minds, you know, enabling us to do the practice more easily. I mean, you can sit on your cushion till the cows come home if you don't have other practices as well, because that's why in Tibetan tradition, they call them the preliminary practices. You know, you got to prepare your body and you prepare your mind to be ready to really start practicing, you know. That's why practicing, taking refuge, doing offerings, making, you know, prostrations, all these are very profound practices that really enable us to deal with daily life more easily. What else, dearest people? That's enough, maybe? What do you think, Venerable Kumpen? We are there yet? More? No? You have any questions? Something I've missed?
Thank you so much, Venerable. I think, Venerable Robina, you spoke so quickly. People got the material for...
An extra 3 hours. We did 3 hours in an hour and a half.
Wonderful.
All right. So just in general, people, whatever path you're on, we've all got the same potential. We have the potential to be happy, and don't get all moralistic. This is Buddha's method for us to get happy, people. Forget about compassion for others yet. This is the method for us to get happy. Buddha's trying to get us to be happy. Don't be moralistic about it. You know, oh, I should give up attachment. Buddha's trying to show us how to be happy. Don't forget that. So please become happy. That's marvelous. Then we can make others happy. Okay, remember that. So try and have a happy mind about practicing. Don't be sort of tortured and beat ourselves up. Mustn't do that. So may compassion grow and grow in the hearts of all. Changchob semchog Rinpoche, ma kepanam kegyuchig, kepan yampa mepayang, gongne gondu pabashok. And let us say the prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Shall we do that? Venerable Kumpen, you lead it to us. Just read it out and we can contemplate. Just read the words. But there's been a couple of, I'll just tell you, I don't know if I told you last time. Did I tell you the dreams? Some people have been having good dreams about Lama Zopa. Did I tell you those last time or not?
You did mention, and then we got so many questions about that. Do you mind repeating, Venerable Robina? There was one dream.
Well, there's one Kunpala. Kadra had a dream December, the year Lama Zopa passed away, December already, which is 10 months after he passed away. January, February, March, April, 12. Yeah, 9 months. She had a dream in which Rinpoche appeared to her and said he was happy where he was, and it seemed like in the mountains, she said. But then somebody, a year later, June, I think, and somebody else had a very vivid dream in the mountains, a very beautiful place. And she was playing a trumpet, like a bone trumpet, but she was, instead of singing into it, instead of blowing it, she was saying, you know, Tatom gate gate para samgati's bodhisavaha. And the first time she played it, the bones shattered into a million pieces. Then I think she said it again, and the last two syllables, instead of saying Bodhisvaha, she found herself saying Lama Zopa. Then she woke up and said, Lama Zopa has been reincarnated. And she looked at the clock. It was like 7 minutes past midnight, the 7th of June or something. So who knows? That sounds like a very nice dream, I think. So maybe he's bopping around. And then apparently I heard in Kathmandu, Venerable Roger told me, there's this Hindu clairvoyant that Lama Zopa always appreciated. And he has said, don't worry, Rinpoche is going to come back quickly. So he's probably bopping along already, age 1 or 1.5 or something, getting ready to be recognized. Wouldn't be surprised. So let's hope. So where's this prayer? You say it to us. Just speak it out, the words, okay? We'll contemplate the meaning.
Dearest teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage lamas, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. By striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in the glory of the fortunate disciples.
Good one, everybody. Keep moving, never give up, never give up, never give up, and have a happy mind and be delighted in your practice, okay? Rejoice, everybody. All right, darlings. So see you next time. We've got more to go, haven't we?
Yes, on the big day, the full moon
Okay.
days.
Okay, good.
Can miracles still happen in the 21st century?
Okay, good. Okay, darling. Okay, bye, everybody.
Thank you so much, Venerable
Bye.
Robina.
Thank you,
Have a
Venerable
lovely
Sura.
day. Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
Guru.
everybody, for joining us. And tomorrow we'll switch time again because our teachers are in so many time zones. Venerable Namjong joins us from Hawaii. How exotic can it get? At 1 o'clock here in India, and he's talking about the Sutra of Golden Light, of course, and how it can solve all the problems in the world. As one of the sutras Lama Zopa Rinpoche always recommended to us to read, so he will do a little bit of explanation and then we do practice. Thank you so much and see you hopefully tomorrow. Have a beautiful evening here in India, a beautiful day in the Americas, and good afternoon in Europe. And I think Australia is going to sleep, the New Zealanders. Thank you so much. Bye.